Why? In your opinion, would a family leave their large, comfortable and warm house and rush to the street under the harsh stings of the cold and its exhausting roar? We can guess together. The house has been robbed. It is possible that an accident occurred in their house, such as a gas leak or a fire. We can move away from more than that. For example, to the presence of a serial killer, a demented thug who roams the halls of the house, brandishing a machete in his hand, and does not attack anyone. Otherwise, this family would be a bunch of lunatics. Nothing else. But allow me to disappoint all your guesses, dear viewer, and warn you from now on that what I will mention in this video is not for the faint-hearted at all. So let's start. On November 19, 1992, at 2:03 in the early morning in the city of Vallecas, in the Spanish capital, Madrid, a patrol of 5 policemen, in addition to Inspector Jose Pedro Negri, headed to Avenue number 8 on Luis Marin Street. There they will find a terrified family who would rather stay in the cold night than at home. The news reported that something or something disturbed their sleep and the bliss of their living in that house. That is why the head of the family, Maximo Gutierrez Palomares, who was 46 years old at the time, resorted to the authorities to put an end to what was going on. The police, in turn, reassured the family that everything would be fine, and immediately the house was stormed by its officers. At 3:00 that morning, the police department received another phone call, but this time it was not a family member. It was Inspector Jose, and his tone of voice was very worried. Jose, in that call, tried to describe what he saw in that house after he saw, according to his moment, in his scattered sentences that he could barely pronounce. There is something unfamiliar and unnatural. It made my hair stand up. He stated that there is a series of inexplicable phenomena that no human mind can even accept. The beginning. March 1990. On a normal day, like any other, 16-year-old Maria Estefania Gutierrez got up to go to school. Maria was the third of 6 siblings: Carabina, Marianella, Ricardo, Maximiliano, and Jose Luis. And like any normal girl, she ate a quick breakfast, kissed her father, Maximo, and her mother, Concepcion, and went to her school, which is located a few minutes away from her home. Marin Street, in the Palomares Soares district of the city of Vallecas. But Maria, the lively and cheerful girl, never knew that her life would be turned upside down. Today, she takes a book out of her bag and starts looking at it intently. A few moments pass, and Maria finds herself surrounded by 2 friends of hers, and all she understands is that she must immediately go to the school bathrooms. Indeed, without long arguments, Maria and her 2 friends went where they wanted, only to find out later that it was an exciting invitation to play a Ouija. And since Maria had played this game many times previously and became familiar with it, she never minded repeating the attempt, and even took the helm, as it is said, on the Ouija board in front of her, especially since one of her friends recently lost her boyfriend, and she wanted to contact him and check on his condition and how he is there in the other world. Without further delay, the 3 friends sit around the usual Ouija board, dotted with numbers and the alphabet, and then place their index fingers on a glass that they use as a planchetto. The session begins, and they close their eyes, start asking questions, waiting for someone to answer. But unfortunately, that session was interrupted because the teacher, Dolores Molina, entered the bathrooms to find her 3 students had formed a strange ring around the Ouija board, which aroused her anger at them and pushed her to pull the board and break it. And of course, The matter was not devoid of reprimands. Meanwhile, none of them were paying attention to the strange thing that was happening next to them. The cup was filled with thick smoke that appeared out of nowhere, and suddenly, that cup exploded into scattered pieces, and unfortunately, that smoke entered Maria's nose. And this was done in the presence of the teacher and both of her friends witnesses to the beginning of a terrifying nightmare that brings woe to her life. As a result of that Ouija session, Maria witnesses a sudden change in her behavior. Her relationship with her family deteriorated so much that she attempted to physically abuse her siblings and parents several times. She started to seem very sensitive and quick to anger. This behavior may have been due to her lack of sleep at night, as according to her family. Maria did not sleep well after that day at school. She suffered hallucinations and visions where a group of dark shadows gathered around her bed, urging her to go with them. She also sometimes makes strange sounds, as if she is coming out of her stomach. According to her mother, Maria would sometimes wander for 15-20 minutes and not react to any stimuli around her, eventually laughing for a long time. When asked what was happening to her, she would reply that she was in a long corridor, ending in a hall covered in thick fog, and some sinister voices were calling from it. Her strange symptoms got worse. The outbursts of anger and hallucinations were more violent and became more frequent. Even her sister, Marianella, who was sharing a room with Maria, claims that one night she saw how her sister was floating while lying in bed. The rest of the family also witnessed strange phenomena and accidents. Returning to Maria, naturally, the first thing both father and mother would think of was illness. Maybe their daughter is sick with some neurological disease. So they took her to many specialists, even to 4 different medical centers to find a solution. However, no one has been able to give them a clear diagnosis or effective treatment. One doctor speculated that Maria suffered from epilepsy, and she even complied with a medication regimen as an epileptic. But it had no effect on her. In addition, her symptoms were not at all similar to those of epilepsy. On the other hand, her mother, Concepcion, previously suffered from epilepsy for a long time, but she did not have hallucinations or voices, meaning that she did not suffer from disorders like those of her daughter. Things continued to get worse. It was clear to the mother, who sat listening to her daughter's strange request. That night, Maria asked her mother not to tell the rest of the family about her imminent death. And when that happens, that is, when they find her dead, they must bury her father's picture next to her. What a request. One night, everyone woke up to the sound of her screaming. She had another seizure, and it seemed to be more powerful than all the previous seizures. The mother narrates her condition, saying, Maria continued for half an hour, shaking violently, holding her head with her hands, and at the same time, foam was flowing from her mouth. She was taken to Gregorio Maranon Hospital and was completely unconscious. 3 hours later, at 2:00 am on July 14, the tragedy was complete, and Maria died of pulmonary suffocation caused by a spasm, which is a very strange diagnosis for a person of her age. Forensic experts wrote in the death certificate, which was signed by the hospital director and chief physician, that Maria died suddenly and suspiciously. It is worth mentioning that Maria had told her family on the morning of her death that she would die, but after a few moments her secrets were revealed, her features transformed, and even her voice changed. So was Maria, the one who prophesied. So was Maria, the one who prophesied and spoke. Or what? Ricardo, Maria's brother, says that his sister has assured him on more than one occasion that she will visit them when she is on the other side, and that they do not have to worry about her death, as she will return again. The cursed house. After Maria's death and the hesitant attempt to forget her, the family lived a stable and quiet period, and gradually began to get out of the circle of misery that surrounded them after the loss of their daughter. And when they thought that the cloud had already lifted from them, none of them could have realized that the horror had only just begun. At first, the strange phenomena were light and rare. Things moved by themselves. Some doors opened and closed by themselves. And one morning it was Maria's bed, strangely scattered. But the situation began to aggravate when, on some nights, Conception felt a distinctly coldness touching her, sometimes even removing the bed sheets from her. With the passage of time, the family began to adapt and live with the conditions. Perhaps Maria was feeling lonely and wanted someone to comfort her, so she resorted to their quarrels, so much so that they left an empty chair and a plate containing food while they ate one of their main meals. What is strange is that the chair was moving, as if someone had pulled it, already sitting, but the food remains as it is and does not touch it. Things began to take another turn when the family began to notice a terrifying shadow in the hallway of the house, in addition to the sounds of malicious laughter as well. And with repetition, Conception decided that the shadow and sound belonged to her father, who died 5 months before Maria. After dementia, Concepcion's relationship with her father was not very good. Some financial disputes between the daughter and the father worsened their relationship, and Maria's grandfather seemed to harbor a dislike for his daughter. It was also said that a few days before his death, he swore that he would make the life of his daughter and her family hell, and it seems that he returned to fulfill his promise. The phenomena reached their peak and became unbearable when they began to affect the physical well-being of the family. Family members began to feel as if someone was pushing them down the stairs, trying to bring them down, and their pet cat became aggressive, most of the time seeming to be chasing something they could never detect. The touch that the mother was subjected to during her sleep turned into an attempt of tug and pull, and one night, the father woke up to the sound of his wife screaming, as if someone was dragging her by her feet so that she would fall from the bed. But when he lit the room, this pull disappeared completely. Her pace quickened. While Concepcion and her son, Ricardo, were chatting around the dining room table, a cup suddenly rose from the table and was thrown towards the son's head. Fortunately, the mother alerted her son at the last moment, so that the latter would avoid her, scattering shards of glass around him. Naturally, the family was terrified, and as a result, everyone moved their bed to the living room to spend the night together, protecting each other, and also closing the door connected to the hallway with heavy furniture to isolate themselves from the crazy ghosts that haunted them. Of course, all of these measures were useless. These mysterious entities were able to hurl objects against the wall of the living room from the outside, and also open the doors wide, no matter the weight on them, causing hysteria in the entire Gutierrez family. In the hope of salvation, the house has become a shrine for spiritualists and charlatans, and those who claim to be in contact with the other world. They were pure fraudsters. They found, in the case of the tragic family, a very easy way to defraud and steal. One of them claimed that a demon called Kripala had taken possession of Maria's body and devoured her soul before she died, and that he had communicated with that demon and told him that the house had become his property. And another, he claimed that he had a weapon that hunts ghosts, and the family actually bought that scrap for a large sum before realizing that it had fallen into fraud. On November 19, 1992, at 2:03 in the early morning in the city of Vallecas, in the Spanish capital, Madrid, a patrol of 5 policemen, in addition to Inspector José Pedro Negri, headed to Avenue number 8 on Luis Marin Street. There they will find a terrified family who would rather stay in the cold night than at home. The news reported that something or something disturbed their sleep and the bliss of their living in that house. That is why the head of the family, Maximo Gutierrez Palomares, who was 46 years old at the time, resorted to the authorities to put an end to what was going on. The police, in turn, reassured the family that everything would be fine, and immediately the house was stormed by its officers. At 3:00 that morning, the police department received another phone call. But this time it was not a family member. It was Inspector José, and his tone of voice was very worried. José, in that call, tried to describe what he saw in that house after he saw, according to his moment, in his scattered sentences that he could barely pronounce. There is something unfamiliar and unnatural. It made my hair stand up. He stated that there is a series of inexplicable phenomena that no human mind can even accept. As mentioned at the beginning, the night of November 19 was the night when it was enough to be content, after a long series of unsuccessful attempts at accommodation, as well as a barrage of charlatans and spiritualists, who, as we also mentioned, were just a scam. However, Father Maximo saw no last resort but to call the police. The call was strange and incomprehensible to the head of the department, since the presence of an unknown foreign entity is not something that the police usually ask for. At first, the police assumed that the father was drunk or was under the influence of some kind of drug, so he was asked some questions about the details of his wedding from his wife, and wife conception fully agreed with his answers. But this confirmation alone was not enough to believe the story told by the couple. So I also listened to the children, who in turn recalled the same details, especially since everyone was experiencing the effects of panic and horror. During the interview with the family, the inspector was stunned when the door of the small closet next to him in the living room opened and closed by itself on several occasions. At that moment, 4 policemen decided to leave the house and go down to the main gate below, leaving only the inspector with his assistant and the family inside the house. The inspector began to inspect the house, especially the doors. Perhaps someone used some mechanism to make them open and close on their own in order to scare the family. But he found nothing. A short time later, while they were talking about what happened, continuing the examination, a loud bang was heard on the balcony of the house. It looked like a rock or a pot hitting. Immediately, the policeman went out to the balcony to check the cause of the noise. But again, they did not find anything. At the same time, while the officer was investigating the noise of the balcony, a clear screaming sound exploded, and it was undoubtedly the sound of a female screaming. Everyone turned again towards the source of the sound, coming from the living room, and there on the table appeared a spot, resembling brown slime. On the cloth cover above it, the family, in turn, confirmed that this sound was Maria's voice. Inspector Negri asked his assistant to take a sample of that substance and went out with the family after he felt that he was losing his temper, especially as he took out his pistol and fired 3 shots. At a foreign object, he saw him running quickly through the stairs. But when the assistant returned with the items to the table to collect samples, the material was completely gone. The inspector noticed a tightly locked door hidden behind a closet that was placed inappropriately in some corner, and when he asked them to remove the closet and open the door, the family objected, The door was the bathroom door that they had previously refrained from using, but with the inspector's insistence, the doors opened again. Negri says that he felt so cold that it made him shiver when he got inside. The bathroom was full of things, and when the family was asked about them, they confirmed that they all belonged to Maria, and that she mysteriously disappeared, and it never occurred to them that she would be here. As the tightness in the inspector's chest increased, he decided to get out of the bathroom and then immediately called the center, where he said that he was faced with a series of inexplicable phenomena. All of the above can be read in detail in the police report. That is, the police report. That is, the incidents were real. So if we assume for a reason that the Gutierrez family is a bunch of crazy, would the police be crazy too? Well, the last part of this story will touch on the most rumored theories about the cursed Valika's house, and then I will leave you the freedom to choose to believe or deny. And maybe you have your own more plausible theory and offer its explanation, accepted by the mind, and reassured by it. Who knows? We also mentioned that Mary's mother, Concepcion, had epileptic seizures at one time, but she was not hallucinating. But hey, there are those who have returned from afar. Concepcion's private doctor, who traveled and left the country in 1990, 2 years before the events began, returned to reveal shocking facts about his patient Concepcion, whose illness he described as very serious. The police based their report on Concepcion's natural symptoms in the hospital, but Concepcion continued to be treated for long periods with a doctor before she resorted to hospitalization. And of course, she will be with normal symptoms due to the long treatment of events inside the house. And why not? Her madness may have prompted her to invent events, especially since all the children were small, and she could influence their opinions and even make them believe things they had not seen. And let's note that 90 of the novels were for the mother and her children, while the father was content to believe. And perhaps what prompted him to this was the consensus of everyone that strange incidents happened at home, especially if they were orchestrated by a crazy patient. Maybe you're thinking now, well, let's argue that mom is crazy and managed to make things up. What about the cops? This theory is considered complementary to the first theory, but it sheds light on the police, specifically on Detective Jose Negri. Returning to Negri's past, we find that he has long been in love with fame, Adoris showing himself as a hero, and he always wished himself to become the talk of the media. Well, there's no crime in this, no robbery, nothing that constitutes even a minor felony, so why not take advantage of stupid news about ghosts and spirits infested with a cursed house in Vallecas? And my name shines. The name of Jose Negri and Mad prevailed in the newspapers and news of that time. And this is of course documented, and as for the strange events, he must have fabricated them with his elements. It would not be difficult at all. The fact that Maria died because of a strange and sudden symptom did not like some doctors, so the body was examined again, sometime after her death, and indeed the substance carbamazepine was found, which is used in the treatment of epilepsy. But it is very dangerous if it is not given in exact amounts according to the prescription, but the mother cause impression was already using that drug. The theory here says that the mother, in good faith, gave her daughter a dose of carbamazepine that she was using, but the dose instead of calming that she was using, calming Maria, her a story of shadows, ghosts, and horrors. To disavow the incident, all Maria's friends, as well as the teacher, agreed that she played Ouija that day, and at the same time they said that Maria was not much different from what she was. Only after a while, Perhaps this period was when the symptoms of disease appeared on her. One of Maria's friends, close to her, said in a television interview years after the incident that Maria had secretly told her about the presence of Western movements in the house. It was before the Ouija game, and adds that one day she told her that a group of strange shadows had been watching her all day. What is the fate of the Gutierrez family? Gradually, for some reason, the phenomena began to fade away, little by little. So much so that they reopened and used the bathroom, and their life seemed to return to calm, but eventually they abandoned the house and left the neighborhood. Of course, there were new residents in the Gutierrez family house, but they did not witness any strange event. Finally, what do you think, dear viewer, about this strange and wondrous story? Could any of the theories be true, or did the other world play its part in it? And if you have another theory of your own, please share it with us as well.